Episode 38 of the Interpretation Station is Call to Order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode. Please be seated. We're back in tutorial mode today. It's been a bit of a while, hasn't it, since we last did a tutorial. I've been quite busy, actually. I've been doing the day job, so haven't been able to set aside the time to do the tutorials recently, but I've tried to been firing out the old world famous Wham Bam Land episodes to keep you sweet, all right. So one of the things that I had on my plate in the last couple of weeks. Yesterday, I was lucky enough hosted a workshop for students from Bath University. It was a UN Bath University joint workshop, and I'd just like to say it was very pleasant meeting all the people that took part. I'd like to say a big hello. Don't feel embarrassed about this. You weren't expecting this. So I want to say a big hello to Catherine, to Caroline, to Severio, to Kezia, and to Anna. So it was really nice meeting you. Hope you got some. Hope you learned a few interesting things in the workshop, and also Elena as well, who organized it. So there you go. It was a pleasure working with you. It was a pleasure. All right. So anyway, now I'm a bit more free. So I can dedicate this episode to you guys. Actually, it's a Russian episode. It was all about Russian, all about interpreting for Russian. So yeah. So this episode is dedicated to the Bath University students. There you go. So so today we're going to be looking we're going into slightly uncharted territory for me, actually. So today's statement is provided to me by Sam. Sam works in Vienna. I think he's a freelancer. I'm not certain. He does a lot of work, though, at the UN institutions in Vienna. So he's actually provided me with a statement delivered by Russia on what is called the UN Convention Against Corruption, Uncac, as it is charmingly acronymed, the Uncac. Now, as I say, I'm not, because I've never worked before at the UN in Vienna. I did take the test there once, actually. Failed. But so I'm not that familiar with the work they do there. But the Uncac comes under the auspices. The secretariat of that is what's called the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. They're the sort of they're the sort of custodian of that convention. Now, even though I've not worked in Vienna, I do know that Russia does participate pretty actively in the work there at UNODC, and they will often refer to it in like big meetings, big sort of summits. They, be it in Geneva or New York or wherever, they will sort of cite their work that they've done with UNODC in terms of, crime prevention, criminal justice, combating drug trafficking. So they're pretty big players in UNODC. So it's always good, even though you may not be working there specifically, it's by no means impossible that you're working in some far-flung corner of the world, who knows where it is, and that suddenly, you have a Russian delegation speaking, and they start talking about all their sort of activities with UNODC in Vienna. So the way I'm going to approach today's episode is, as I say, I have a rough knowledge of some of the stuff that they do there. Just to give you a little bit more of an idea, we're just going to take a look at a couple of websites just to give us a bit of background information and see what the sort of most important themes are that they address. By the way, just before I go any further, I should just remind you, please do sign up to my LinkedIn group. By the way, I'm going to put a thing up on the screen just as a reminder, in case you don't watch the end of the episode when I usually do my advertising. Make sure you, if you're on LinkedIn, to join the Interpretation Station LinkedIn group. That's where I put all my my annotated pages. That's what I use as sort of archive. So go there. Anyway, back to business. So the first thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to share the screen with you. You've always got to be careful when sharing your screen with people. You always got to make sure that you've edited all your tabs You don't want to find that dodgy Pornhub tab lying around, do you? Anyway, no, there's nothing very interesting here for me, don't worry. So the first place we're going to start is actually the home page of UNODC. And what I suggest we do, I've actually opened the English page up here. I'll close that. I've also opened the Russian page up so that we can sort of cross-reference some of the most important elements. So if you realize that Russia is going to be talking about something to do with UNODC, which in Russian, by the way, is Управление ООН по наркотикам и преступности. Okay. What we can do is we can have a look at the topics here. Okay. So we have a series here: alternative development, corruption, crime prevention, criminal justice, cybercrime, drug prevention, treatment and care, drug trafficking, firearms, falsified medical products. That could be a big one in the future. HIV and AIDS, human trafficking, migrant smuggling, maritime crime and piracy, money laundering, organized crime, terrorism prevention, wildfire and forest crime. So it's useful just to know these sort of big topics, these themes, because these are going to get raised not just at UNODC but just generally in many meetings, I think, and then to just cross-reference them, you see, with what the Russian is. And it's interesting, because I looked at this a bit earlier. There were a couple I wouldn't have known. For example, this corruption is clear enough. Предупреждение преступности и уголовное правосудие. This is an important expression. Уголовное правосудие. I wasn't 100% certain. Criminal procedure, we find out, obviously. We look here. Criminal justice. It's not necessarily an expression that will spring straight to mind if you haven't been dealing with the subject a lot recently. So that's an important thing to remember. Уголовное правосудие, criminal justice. Профилактика наркомании и лечение. Again, this is something that they've mentioned a lot, narkomania. Okay, you may be wondering, how do they... I know at the Security Council, when I worked at the Security Council, they talk about things to do with narkomania, often linked with what's going on, for example, in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the whole issue of, the opium trade there is very much tied in with the whole overall situation, and that's one of the aspects that and so in English we say drug prevention, treatment and care. So that's a good one to know. Okay, so they talk about they don't really they don't have a like for like word for narkomania. I guess maybe if there was one, it would be like drug addiction, perhaps. It would, but here, so that topic here in the English is called drug prevention, treatment and care. Незаконный оборот наркотиков, for the illegal drugs trade. This is an important. Огнестрельное оружие, firearms, that gets used a lot. So as I was saying, поддельные лекарства. As we see in the English, it is falsified medical products. So note that one, I would say. Remember that one. Okay, here, торговля людьми, human trafficking, that's fairly straightforward. Very important, again, though, for the Russians. Пиратство, so in the English, it's a bit more than just piracy. They call it maritime crime and piracy. That whole topic is known as. Okay, ВИЧ, speed, HIV, AIDS. Отмывание денег, that's a very important one. Do you know it? I knew it, so it's a very important one to know. It is, of course, money laundering, right? Money laundering. Bouncing back and forth here, almost at the end. This is an interesting, this very last one. Okay, предупреждение терроризма, that's prevention of terrorism, that's fair enough. Преступление против живой природы. Now, when I saw that first, I thought that was like crimes against nature. That would have been my guess. In the English, they call it wildfire and forest crime. That's the equivalent. So it's a bit different. So those are the main subject areas that UNODC covers. Now, specific to today's statement, we're obviously, as I say, looking at the Uncac. So here, I looked at Wikipedia. It's always sort of the most Always, I guess, the go-to place for these days for new information, right? Okay, so the main thing to know about the Uncac, as I say, I've looked through this, I'd say, and the things I know that get mentioned. Okay, so it's a legally binding international anti-corruption multilateral treaty, adopted in October 2003. So this is the UN. So if you look here, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC in Vienna, serves as a secretariat for the Uncac. And then a lot of these expressions in blue are going to be important. So okay, abuse of power, private sector, embezzlement, money laundering. Even if imagine you're reading this, you're preparing for the meeting. Even if you don't know what the exact equivalent is in Russian, it doesn't always matter. Usually, often you can, from the context, when the Russians are speaking, you can probably suddenly see, what is that word he's using, that subject's to do with embezzlement. So it's important just to know the main, in English, what the main areas are. And by the way, this is going to be an important one today. So asset recovery. So when I did the statement that Sam provided, as I say, I'm not very used to doing meetings on this subject. And the first time that expression was used, it didn't come to me immediately. And it's used quite a few times, as you'll see in the text. But so that's an important. I think it's восстановление активов, возвращение активов. Okay, asset recovery. That's very important in this context. And then, yes, so measures and provisions of the convention. This is important. The 5 main areas. Okay, they include both mandatory and non-mandatory provisions. So preventive measures, criminalization and law enforcement, international cooperation, asset recovery, and technical assistance and information exchange, they call it here. That's one of those things, knowledge sharing is another synonym for that kind of thing, for information exchange. So those are the main areas that the Uncac is going to cover. So that's just to give you a rough overview of what's coming. There will be another treaty that they're going to mention during the text that we'll take a look at when we actually get to it. It's called the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, and it's another one that the Russians will invoke quite a bit in the context of certain problematic situations around the world. But we'll look at that when we see that when we come to it. Okay, so as I say, that gives you a bit of background then before we get started. And so without any further ado, I think we'll get now to the academic section. Just remember before you start that, I've put in the description box the link to the original text. I have included, I've got a link to the hard copy of the statement. You follow the link, you record yourself, you print off the hard copy, and then you watch the show and you see what you did right or wrong. And hopefully we'll learn a few new things today. All right, so let's go to the academic part of the show. Okay, so let's get started. So this is actually the Russian delegate at this conference. His name was Mr. Avetsian, and this was speaking on the occasion of the 15th anniversary of the adoption of the UN Convention Against Corruption, and it's from May 2018. So, here we go.
Distinguished Chairperson, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Russia is an ardent supporter of the central coordinating role of the UN in international anti-corruption cooperation.
Now, it's interesting what you said there at the start. So I always do the statement myself as well before I do one of these episodes. It's like due diligence. You've got to know what's coming, right? And so he said, Россия последовательно выступает за. And when I was doing it, I said, Russia is a firm supporter of the central coordinating role. And it was a slightly new approach that I was adopting doing that, because usually I'll say it as a verb. I'll say Russia firmly supports, or Russia consistently supports etc., etc. But on this occasion, so I thought I'm going to change it. I'm going to turn that into a noun. The supporter. I'm going to say Russia is a firm supporter. Now, why did I do that? Now, the thing is, it's fine if it's выступает за. In this case, okay, центральную координирующую роль. It's a noun, okay. So Russia firmly supports the central coordinating role. Sometimes, though, it's Россия последовательно выступает за то, чтобы, so of something else happening, and that requires having to sort of flip things around a bit with the syntax. You know, you have to say Russia supports giving a greater role to, or Russia supports the Security Council focusing more on. You have to fiddle with that. Whereas if you just say is a firm supporter of, that you can actually go both ways, right? You've got that out of the way, so you can either say, okay, Russia is a firm supporter of, and then you wait for it, the central coordinating role, or that Russia is a firm supporter of doing this, that, and the other. Russia is a firm supporter of the Security Council doing this and that. It just leaves you slightly more prepared than if you just say Russia supports. If you just say Russia supports, then you have to adjust the rest of the sentence once you hear the second part of it. Whereas if you just say Russia is a firm supporter of, it doesn't matter if it goes into a noun or into a verb. You can just adapt it immediately. So it's very interesting that that Sam has adopted the same approach, actually. He said Russia is an ardent supporter, which is actually even better than a firm supporter, as I said. So that's something that I am going to try and myself introduce more into my own interpreting when they say выступает за. I'm going to say Russia is, you know, a firm supporter of, or firm advocate of, is another alternative.
UN Convention Against Corruption, which currently has 186 states parties.
Okay, so насчитывающий. This long word here just basically means which has. That's all it really means with the number. Okay, how many states parties? So участник. Okay, he said states parties. You can say parties, but it's not. It's parties, not participant. Okay, when you're talking about the members of a convention or of a treaty, it's the parties. Okay, so be careful not to say participants. And KPK, by the way, that is the famous Uncac.
Represents an international legal framework for cooperation between states in preventing and countering corruption.
Just one thing I'd say here. Взаимодействие, this is this sort of favorite word in Russian. So what I tend to do is, because obviously you have a synonym in Russian, сотрудничество. And I'm never certain, you know, the Russians, I'm certain there must be some slight difference in the nuance of the meaning between взаимодействие, сотрудничество. So just to keep the Russians happy, to keep, you know, the minion behind the ambassador happy, I just sort of, for сотрудничество, I say cooperation, but when it's взаимодействие, I'll say interaction. It's not a very pretty word in English, interaction, but I get the impression that that's what. It's maybe just a personal thing. I just like to separate those two words, сотрудничество and взаимодействие. And that's okay. Противодействие коррупции. So he said countering corruption, combating corruption is another option.
It is a unique international convention which covers all kinds of cooperation in this area.
Okay, now it's interesting. So here he talks about the международный договор, and he says a convention. No, it is a convention. Okay, so I'm going to just remember that, because something similar is going to happen a little bit later, and I'll just come back to it in a bit more detail later on. And so he goes with весь спектр сотрудничества. So he goes with all kinds of cooperation. I like for spectrum. I must say, I do like to just go with the cognate. I have a tendency to say the spectrum. It covers the whole spectrum of cooperation, And I think it's one of those cognates. I think it works quite well. So what Sam said is perfectly good. I'm just saying that I do like to use spectrum.
Including measures to prevent corruption in the private and public sectors, cooperation between law enforcement agencies.
Окей, вопросы взаимодействия правоохранительных органов. So it's good. He drops the vapros. He doesn't bother with the issues of, and again, that's a perfectly legitimate thing. Again, the speed the speaker is going. He's going quite fast, but so when something's redundant, if you think that you're better served just by, you know, doing this at the start, it leaves you maybe more energy later on. So he's thought to himself, look, I don't need to say vaprosi. Just saying by itself, cooperation between law enforcement bodies gets the message across anyway. So it's like sort of preventive maintenance, if you like. So you just keep reserving that bit of energy for further on. It's a 7-8 minute statement. You're going to probably need all your brain power at some point. So it's okay if you don't need to say something in that, even though it's early on, just leave it out. It's a perfectly legitimate tactic. Правоохранительных органов, so law enforcement bodies, that's an important notion.
Measures to recover assets received through corruption-related crime.
Okay, so this is the famous, as we're saying, asset recovery, so recovery of assets. So that is a very important theme in UNODC. So he said, for полученных в результате совершения коррупционных преступлений. So he's gone with received through, received through corrupt activities. I would perhaps say acquired through. I think maybe sounds a little bit better in English. Just a small thing though.
Provisional technical assistance, MLA, and extradition.
Okay, Sam uses very discreetly a very discreet acronym there that almost passed me by. I had to listen to it through twice, and it's for предоставление правовой помощи. Now I know правовая помощь. It's legal assistance. So this apparently is a thing at UNODC, kind of mutual legal assistance. And it seems that at UNODC they have this acronym for it, MLA. So if that's the case, if you're working in Vienna and that is accepted as a perfectly good acronym, then go for it. So just worth pointing that out. Another important word, of course, is vydacha, extradition. Very important one there.
In 2015, Russia successfully held in St. Petersburg the sixth session of the Conference of the State Parties to Uncac, which is a major UN anti-corruption forum.
Just note here again, Forum på эгидой ООН. So he's just flipped it slightly. The syntax. He said it's a major UN anti-corruption forum. Okay, so when you say it that way, you don't need to render the под эгидой, which would otherwise be under the auspices, under the aegis.
It involved delegations from 162 countries, a number of intergovernmental organizations, and 88 NGOs.
Now, this is an interesting sentence here, okay, because the technique that Sam uses. Okay, so it starts with мероприятий. So he just said it. Okay, so he's just referring to the event. He didn't say in it. He just said it. When I did it, I did say the event. So I rendered мероприятие as the event. But like Sam, I didn't say in the event. Okay, I turned the мероприятие into the subject of the sentence. And now, funnily enough, this was something I was discussing with those nice students from Bath yesterday, and it's a technique. My colleague who also works in Vienna, she's called Sarah. You know who I'm talking about. Big hi to Sarah. So she's a great teacher as well. She works there. So she calls this technique nominalization. Okay, Sarah Irene is her name. Absolute star. It's when you turn the first noun you turn it into the subject of the sentence. It's a very important technique when you're interpreting from Russian into English. So that is what both Sam and myself did. We turned that, instead of saying in the event, or at the event, we just turn it into the noun. We say the event, and then участвовали делегации. So then you have to turn that verb участвовать. Okay, you can't say anymore participated. You can't say the event participated. You could say the event saw the participation of. That's one technique for doing it. Sam said it involved, which is also a perfectly good solution. So it's just, you have to, like, when you do this technique of nominalization, when you put that first noun, when you make it the subject, you just have to slightly tweak the remainder of the sentence for it to flow properly. So as I say, my technique, I said the event saw the participation of, or Sam, he said it involved, the event involved.
Since the adoption of Uncac, International Anti-Corruption Cooperation has seen some positive trends, but there are a number of issues which are yet to be resolved.
No, it's interesting because, as I say, we just talked about nominalization in the previous sentence, and lo and behold, the guy does exactly the same thing in this sentence. Now, it's not right at the start of the sentence, but okay, so even though since the adoption of the convention, в международном антикоррупционном сотрудничестве наблюдается. Same syntax, the same structure as the previous sentence, okay? And what Sam has done, he said, the international anti-corruption cooperation has seen positive trends. It's exactly that. He's nominalized. He's turned that locative, в международном антикоррупционном сотрудничестве, he's made it a subject, okay, and it then makes the rest of the sentence flow much easier, okay. And then, okay, the second half of the sentence. Oh, by the way, dynamica he said trends, better than tendencies. You could say положительная динамика, positive trends, positive progress. The last bit of that sentence, немало требующих решения проблем. One thing I'll say here is that, okay, you can almost tell from the way the sentence is going, it's like you started by saying that even though since the adoption of the convention, we've seen a lot of positive progress, you can almost tell that, okay, the sentence is going to end with, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think Sam's solution was fairly literal. He did it quite, there's still a lot of problems needing to be resolved or whatever. But just know also that, again, if you're falling behind and you can anticipate that that's the way the sentence is going, you can just sort of get out something like, there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of work ahead. So you don't always need to get the exact word for word rendering of that idea.
Including in the area of asset recovery. In particular, the differences in the substantive and procedural law in different countries when it comes to the confiscation and recovery of assets.
One interesting thing to pick up in this sentence, something that Sam has just taught me. So, в нормах материального и процессуального права. So he said the substantive and procedural law. Now, I must admit, when I did it myself, I think I just said material and procedural law, but it does seem like the technical rendering for that is substantive law, for материальный. So that's a good thing just to note if you hear that, substantive law.
Difficulties in conducting investigations owing to the legal systems of certain states.
So Sam makes a slight contresens here. В условиях юрисдикции нескольких государств. So he says, owing to the jurisdiction of certain states. Now, I think the idea here is that it's about the different jurisdictions from sort of one state to another, okay, in terms of what you can do at a legal level. The standards, the laws aren't always the same. maybe it would have been more clear. Maybe it would have been clearer if he'd said something like complexities in conducting investigations owing to the jurisdictions of more than one state, or owing to the jurisdictions of several states. So I think that's the idea that the speaker's trying to get across.
Lack of understanding of procedures for mutual legal assistance, and problems relating to the detection and identification of the proceeds of corruption.
Okay, a couple of things here. I like what he's done with informiranost. Okay, I think when I hear, I tend to just go for information. Maybe aware. Maybe I said awareness. Actually, so you said understanding. So understanding is very good for informiranost. I also think actually awareness is a good alternative as well. So keep those two in mind. It's a word that you'll hear quite a bit. And then he's gone, so for отслеживание и обнаружение, so he said these are important concepts to know when it comes to sort of criminal investigations, when they're trying to track down where certain assets have disappeared to. So отслеживание, he said identification, and обнаружение, he said detecting. So I like detecting for обнаружение. I think for отслеживание, I would perhaps go more with tracking, following. I think that's the idea of отслеживание, more than just identification. So yeah, with доходов, we're usually perhaps more used to rendering that as income or revenue sometimes. But certainly when it comes to money acquired through criminal means, it can often mean the proceeds, which is exactly what Sam went for, illegal proceeds. As a result of, коррупционной действие коррупционной направленности. It's a great sort of sounding euphemism, that can just, again, be just pared down to, I don't know, corrupt activities.
We believe that to resolve these problems, it would help to develop a separate international legal instrument under UN auspices for asset recovery.
Okay, so here we go again with an example of nominalization. So let's first look at how Sam's done it. Okay, что успешному преодолению упомянутых проблем. So he's gone for that to resolve these problems, to successfully resolve these problems. And he sort of like puts a comma there, and then способствовало бы разработка. It would help to develop a separate multilateral instrument. So that's the way he's done it. Now, the way I did it was a bit more standard sort of nominalization. So I just went успешному преодолению. I just said successfully overcoming. I said we believe that successfully overcoming these problems, the aforementioned problems. Now, способствовало бы. So the thing that's getting helped is the successful overcoming. It's getting helped by something else. So first, I would usually make it passive. I'd say successfully overcoming these problems would be helped by the development of a separate mechanism. So usually I go with help in that scenario. But I've had, again, a bit of inspiration. One of my moments in the toilet, bit of inspiration. Rather than it would help, it's occurred to me, maybe it sounds better, it would benefit from. Okay, I think that flows a bit better in English. I'd say the successfully overcoming these problems would benefit from developing a separate multilateral international instrument. Okay, on we go.
The new international convention would help to fill in any legal loopholes.
Okay, so remember I said earlier on in the text, in the first paragraph, when they'd mentioned the dogovor, he'd said convention. So notice he does it again here, okay? He goes with Международный договор, he says international convention. Now, again, although he's probably right, with these sorts of words like dogovor, I do like to just play safe with them, to be honest. Just for dogovor, I tend to say just treaty, because all conventions are treaties, but not all treaties are conventions. Okay, so I would be inclined to just play safe. Just say for dogovor, treaty. For these kinds of words, dogovor, treaty, dogovorionность, an arrangement, соглашение, agreement. I really like to, as I say, I've used this metaphor before, play a straight bat like in cricket, okay? No messing around, okay? Just have one set solution. You don't need to overcomplicate. And then he says, okay, ustranit pravovые пробелы. So he says it would fill in existing legal loopholes, which is a good solution. One expression that I do like a lot, that's very versatile for a lot of issues, and which I think would again work here, is the old one of bridging gaps. They love bridging gaps at the UN, remember. So I think here you could say it would bridge existing legal gaps. Okay, they use that cliche all the time, but it's very handy. It's very handy, trust me.
And address uncertainty and differences in legal standards between states.
Неопределенности. He said uncertainties, which is good, it's fine. I've had a couple of things have occurred to me for неопределенности that might be worth running with as well. So grey areas is one idea, and also blind spots. So those are things to just consider further down the road that might, these expressions they could come in handy.
It would also provide for measures for the disposal of confiscated and recovered assets.
So it's good how he said прописать меры, okay, provide for measures, that's very good. Standard solution for прописать, stipulate, set forth also. Now this one word here, распоряжению возвращенными активами. So Sam has gone here with the disposal of recovered assets. I'm just not certain about that word. See, when I hear disposal of something, I tend to think more of you dispose of something, you get rid of it. And obviously here it's not a question of getting rid of these assets. So these are assets that have been seized, and then the question is what to do with them, how to sort of redistribute them. And in fact, I think when I did it, I said redistribute the assets. Then I looked it up. I went to multitran.ru. So they've actually the administration of the assets. Okay, that's the collocation that they've gone for in multitran. So basically, I haven't got a firm answer to give you. So I'm just saying that when I hear disposal of, a lot of the time I think of just throwing stuff out, which is why I was I sort of slightly questioned it. But I think it might be fine as well. But administration seems like a good solution. It's a fairly neutral solution that doesn't really lend itself to much confusion. So
it would also help to ensure the full implementation of Uncac.
Okay, so what's interesting in this sentence is, okay, so here's our old friend способствовать coming up again, but in a slightly different form to how we had it in the first sentence of that paragraph. Remember, in the first sentence of the paragraph, the Russian was structured as object, verb, subject at the end, and we said I said a good solution could be would benefit from, or you could say it would be helped by. Here, the Russian syntax is different, though, in this occasion. Here it's dogovor, so it goes now, this is more like English, okay? It goes subject dogovor, verb способствовать, and the object is the realizacja in this case. So usually when in those scenarios with способствовать, I tend to go with contribute to, okay? So such a treaty would contribute to full implementation of the UN Convention. So Sam he hasn't gone for contribute, he said such a treaty or it would help ensure full implementation of the convention, which is also fine. So it's just interesting to look at that способствовать, how to just tweak it depending on on the Russian syntax, basically. And then at the end of that sentence, you may have heard him throw in another acronym there, another sneaky acronym. Sam seems to like throwing in his sneaky acronyms, doesn't he? His MLAs and his Untalks. So this is the UN convention. I think I mentioned this in the intro. The UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. And apparently, yes, UNTOC is a perfectly legitimate acronym to be used there. And it's a good one to know. I've heard the Russians mention this in forum, in New York, in Geneva, with regards to various issues. Apparently, it was adopted in 2000. Some of the main things it features: policies regarding wildlife smuggling. Brakoniерstwo, by the way, that's in Russian. If you come across the word brakonierstwo, that is smuggling. And then apparently they used it. It was sort of, apparently according to Wikipedia, Japan prepared the organization of the 2019 Rugby World Cup and the 2020 Summer Olympics. While it was preparing, it faced the issue of not being fully compliant with the UNTOC, thus jeopardizing its eligibility to organize those events. And so apparently the UNTOC has 3 supplementary protocols. This is an important one, this first one. Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. So I've heard of that one. Protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, sea, and air. And the protocol against the illicit manufacturing and trafficking in firearms. So those 3 subjects apparently are pretty important with respect to human trafficking, arms trafficking, money laundering. And again, UNODC is the custodian of that convention, of the UNTOC. So again, just be aware of it. Be aware of its existence.
Federation attaches great importance to the review mechanism under Uncac. It is a key peer review.
Okay, so just old friend of an expression here, uделяет особое внимание. So Sam here has gone with attaches great importance. I'm sure I've told you this before. I like to set great store by things, or if I just need a one-word solution, I prioritize. If I'm falling behind, that's a one quick word that sort of might help me catch up. And what he does here, so you'll see this sentence is actually a bit longer, so he splits it up. Rather than saying implementation of the Uncac, which is, he's just put this full stop, now he's starting a new sentence.
It is a key peer review process which helps to identify best practices and shortcomings in the implementation of Uncac.
Okay, so did you see how he did that? So he just said the который является, he just said it is a key instrument. So that's a good tactic. Because some of these sentences in this statement, I don't know if you've noticed, they're pretty long, actually. The guy does go into quite long sentences, so it can be very helpful just to break it up, okay? And it's interesting, this is he talks about проведение коллегиальных обзоров. Now, when I did this, I'd not heard this this expression before, коллегиальные обзоры. I think I went with collective reviews, okay? I think there was something I had similar in some Spanish texts quite recently when they talk about de manera colegial. And it's collegial. It doesn't sound good in English, okay? And I think at the time I went with collective. So that's what I went for here. I said it was a collective review. But apparently this appears to be the sort of expression they use at the UNODC, at Uncac, for a peer review. Now, where I work in Geneva, they have the Universal Periodic Review, and that in Russian, I think they tend to talk about obzor ravnych. They talk about ravnych as being the peer. So this seems to be another sort of synonym for peer review. This коллегиальный обзор. I must admit, I've not heard that used in Geneva, but perhaps they use it more. It's more a sort of Vienna term. You find that certain institutions have their own little micro vocabularies that they use. So maybe this is a Vienna thing. And then, okay, we had wyjawienie. С целью выявления как успешных видов практик. So like with the view to identifying. Sometimes I go with pinpointing just for an alternative to identifying. Проблемных аспектов. So I think Sam said shortcomings or gaps. Again, you could just say gaps. So you don't need two words there in Russian. You can just find one word in English that encapsulates that idea.
Unique, depoliticized mechanism whereby countries with different legal and political systems and levels of economic development are able to discharge their functions as assessor countries and countries being assessed.
Okay, a couple of things here. So mechanism в рамках которого. So it's good. So he's just gone for one word to say в рамках которого, whereby. You know, you don't need to say in accordance with which, in the framework of which, in the context of which. So in English, whereby does the job for you, okay? And then, okay, so you skip the равноправно выполняют функции. So, okay, they discharge the functions равноправно, you know, on an equal footing, equitably, as equals. And then he talks about, okay, this как обозреваемых, так и обозревающих государств. Now, when I did this, I said as reviewer and as reviewer countries and states under review. So Sam here, he actually said, it's just worth listening again to what he said.
Political systems and levels of economic development are able to discharge their functions as assessor countries and countries being assessed.
So here Sam talks about assessor countries and countries being assessed. Now, when I did it, I think I said reviewer countries and countries under review. So I wasn't certain if maybe the assessor thing was a sort of, again, Vienna jargon, that you know, just the sort of set terminology they used. I see, you know, that countries do there's self-assessments that take place. There's a group within, as part of it's called the Uncac review mechanism. Basically, there's a review process that includes a self-assessment, a peer review, a country review report, and an executive summary. So again, it seems quite similar to the UPR in Geneva. So perhaps the assessor is the word that they're after in Geneva. But again, I mean, I think, you know, if you were to say review as well, it would be fine. Again, it's one of the advantages if you happen to be doing that given convention, a given body a lot, you're going to be very familiar with the sort of in jargon. So perhaps maybe Sam, you could put in the comments, is assessor, is that the in jargon at Vienna for this? Okay, let's carry on.
For it to function properly, it needs to be transparent, non-punitive, and technical in nature.
So a few interesting adjectives here, okay, how it needs to be. Okay, so беспристрастный, obviously impartial. Then, okay, he skips несостязательным. So некарательным, so non-punitive, that sounds good. I'm just wondering, I think when I did it and I heard несостязательным, I think I said non-competitive. Состязание is like a competition, like rivalry. So I think you'd say maybe non-competitive.
It is also important that it stands as an intergovernmental process on the basis of the principles of the equality and sovereignty of states and the non-interference in the domestic affairs of state parties to Uncac.
Okay, I like how he's gone. Немаловажно и то. So he said it's also important. I tend to go when I hear that, you know, it's what's equally important. Just don't get into like what is of no less importance. You can trip up over there's too many words. So I say what's equally important is. And then at the end of this paragraph, исключает любое вмешательство в внутренние дела. Okay, so he talks about, there mustn't be any interference in the internal affairs of states. Now, just for as a good solution for исключает, a word I've been using a lot the last couple of weeks, by the way, eschew, to eschew something, okay? So I've been using it in the context of, because the states have to отказаться от применения силы, okay? Just often I'll say abstain from, refrain from doing something, but actually if you just eschew something, you don't need any preposition. So here you can just say that should eschew any interference in the internal affairs of states. And then here at the end, любое ранжирование. So Sam skips that. Maybe the speaker skipped out of the originals. The speaker skips out words here and there. Ранжирование would be like it should eschew grading, okay, or ranking. Ranking countries against each other.
In our view, the review mechanism of Uncac has proven to be effective and sound.
I like how he's done that. Okay, зарекомендовал себя. Often, I mean, you often just have that by itself, and it's really proven itself. We say in English, right? So here it's proven itself effective, and for состоятельно, sound is a very good adjective.
We believe that its main features could underpin another review mechanism, namely the review mechanism of the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime.
Okay, характеристики. So characteristics, I don't know, it's a bit of a mouthful in English. It sounds a bit clumsy sometimes, I think. So instead of характеристики, he said features. So I think I said, okay, основные характеристики. So I think I said for that hallmarks. See, основные характеристики, 2 words. In English, that's really just the hallmarks. Features isn't bad. Лечь в основу. So I like what he's done here, you see, Sam. Underpin. So you got 3 Russian words. Лечь в основу. So Sam just said can underpin. Beautiful. And then, okay, создаваемого. See this word here? He just skips it. Perfectly legitimate. You don't need... Because, okay, if you wanted to include it, it would be like, could underpin the review mechanism that was created under another UN convention. But again, it's a bit redundant that создаваемого. Just the review mechanism of another UN convention flows much more smoothly. So again, don't feel you have to render every single word. It's very important. Be smart. Think on your feet.
Russia is a major donor to some of the most significant anti-corruption projects currently underway.
Okay, so по линии УНП, реализуемых по линии УНП. So when you hear по линии, just through UNODC. Okay, УНП is the short, or that's the acronym for UNODC.
The difficult financial situation surrounding the review mechanism in 2014 led the Russian Federation to provide financial assistance.
Okay, неблагоприятная финансовая ситуация. This is a word you hear quite a bit. Неблагоприятная. So he said, yeah, the difficult situation. Okay. Sometimes I've wondered the inclement financial situation. Can we talk about financial situations being inclement? I'll get back to you on that one. But yeah, so just sort of difficult though is perfectly good. All right. The tough financial situation. Challenging is another good one. All right. That's a good synonym generally for difficult. Something's challenging. And it's also interesting, again, what Sam does here, в связи с неблагоприятной финансовой ситуацией. So he turns the неблагоприятной финансовой ситуации into the subject. He nominalizes it, okay? Now, so that means it goes, okay, the difficult financial situation with the review mechanism on implementation of the convention in 2014, it led to the Russian government, okay? So he's added this led to, so he needs to add it, but that way the sentence flows properly. The other way of doing this would have just been, okay, в связи с неблагоприятной финансовой ситуацией, with respect to the difficult financial situation, with the mechanism, the review mechanism for implementation of the convention in 2014, the government did this, that, and the other. That's if you did it with if you rendered the visfizi at the start. But okay, so Sam's taken the decision. Okay, I'm not going to do the visfizi. I'm going to turn неблагоприятной финансовой ситуации into the subject, which he's done skillfully, and he's gone along and he's added that. He's remembered to put in that led to the government, or you could have maybe said it prompted the government to do what it's about to do. But just note what Sam has done there. It's very skillful how he's done that.
Provide financial assistance through the payment of a one-off lump sum of over $1 million for the purposes of this mechanism.
Okay, so here this выделение единовременного добровольного взноса. So he's he says just paying a one-off lump sum. That's very good, by the way, for единовременный взнос. Okay, what lump sum? So payment, or you could have said disbursing, allocating, maybe. And then with a figure, okay, so the exact figure is $1,126,000. But notice what he's done. He just says of over 1 million. That's perfectly good. You don't need to get the level of detail of the 126,000. You know, I tell you what, if you get that detail, maybe you really force yourself. I'm going to get the exact figure that the Russian guy is saying, and you get it out, and you have that tenth of a second where you feel so proud of yourself that you've got that exact figure down. Meanwhile, in that moment of celebrating getting that exact figure, you then miss the next 3-4 words. You don't know where the actual money's going from. So what's the use in that? You've got the figure. You've gone all the trouble to get the figure right, but then you don't know where the money's going to. And I tell you, what's more important here is where the money's going to than the exact figure. So again, think on your feet here. Get the figure roughly right. 1 million, over 1 million. That's great. Make sure you know where it's going. It's going exclusively for the purposes of the mechanism, as Sam says.
This was done on top of our regular payment of voluntary contributions to the UNADC fund.
I like how he's done помимо регулярного отчисления, on top of. So I tend to go with помимо. This was, besides, in addition. That's good. On top of our regular, again, отчисление, similar to выделение, our regular payment, our regular disbursement.
Furthermore, in 2014, we made another voluntary contribution to the UNADC fund to the tune of $1 million for general purposes.
В размере $1 million, to the tune of. That's very nice. That's a very nice expression, actually. To the amount of, to the tune of. It's great. Interesting how he says общие. I notice he goes with before нужды механизма, общие нужды. So he said purposes for the purposes of the mechanism, for general purposes. Maybe that's better than in this case need. Obviously, generally with нужда you're going with needs, but maybe in the context purposes could be better.
The Russian Federation and UDC are engaged in anti-corruption projects together.
Okay, so it's interesting what he does here. So perhaps he tuned into this sentence a bit later. Maybe he missed the first chunk of it. Anyway, he heard. So he's flipped this. So he's waited. So you see in the sentence, Russia и UNP. They're the subject of this sentence, but they come at the end. So he said, okay, Russia and ODC are engaged in joint anti-corruption projects. But let's think. Maybe this is the theme of today's lesson, nominalization, right? Turning these expressions, putting what you have at the start of the sentence, making it the subject. And then if you were to do that, which I think I did when I did it, успешно реализуются. You could say currently there is successful implementation of joint anti-corruption projects between Russia and UNODC. Or you could the old we technique. We're currently implementing joint anti-corruption projects ourselves. If you were to do that, you would do it like this, right? We're currently implementing joint anti-corruption projects ourselves and the UNODC. So there's a couple of ways around that, okay? So you can do what Sam did, wait. That's risky when you wait, because you've got to remember everything that came before it. You got everything that came before the subject. Or, as I say, you can do it with the neutral there is successful implementation of. You turn the verb into a noun. Realizujется becomes a noun. There is successful implementation. Or we successfully are implementing joint projects, and then just tweak it, to give that idea. We are, as in we, Russia and UNODC.
Together, for example, every year Moscow, using the funds provided by Russia as voluntary contributions and with the support of the General Prosecutor's Office, training courses are held for experts involved in the Uncac review process.
Okay, so this is a tough sentence here, starting from ежегодной практикой стало проведение. So Sam's had a good crack at it, actually, sort of tweaked the sentence around, ежегодной практикой, so he just said, every year there's the holding in Moscow, and then he goes into, the bit in brackets, using funds from the Russian voluntary contribution. He does skip out, he does miss out the involvement of the upravlение, the office, okay? So I just want to look how I would perhaps suggest doing it. Okay, I have the benefit of the text in front of me. But again, this is another example of nominalization here. This ежегодной практикой. Okay, so it's in the instrumental here in Russian. We want to put it into we want to turn it into the subject of the sentence. So we might say an annual event or an annual feature, stalo. Okay, so that's become, obviously. But obviously it makes more sense to say, okay, in English, we would say the holding of this event in Moscow has become an annual event. It's awkward. In English, we would do it the other way around. So rather than saying an annual event has become the holding in Moscow, that stala, I would tend to maybe flip it to say an annual event is now. Okay, it sounds slightly more natural in English that way. Saying an annual event now is the holding by the upravlение, by the office in Moscow, and then, as Sam said, with the voluntary contributions from Russia, with the support of the Prosecutor General of the Russian Federation. Now, obviously, this проведение, what's being held? You don't get this until, look, three lines later. Подготовительных курсов для контактных лиц. Okay, so the holding is basically training courses, right? So this is a real tough Russian sentence I'm saying. So as I say, I think that if I was to just do it now, I would say an annual event is now the holding, well, if you like, the hosting by the office in Moscow using the funds of the Russian voluntary contribution to the ODC fund with the support of the Russian Prosecutor General of training courses, of workshops. Okay, do you see what I'm getting at? It's tricky. So that's the only way to get it to really to have. That'll give you the best chance of getting all the important information in. Okay. Now, within what I've just given you, there's a couple of other things I just want to highlight. За счет части средств. Okay, so using part of the voluntary contribution. That's all за счет means. It's basically just using. Okay. Now, Генеральная прокуратура Российской Федерации. So I just decided to look up. So Генеральная прокуратура Российской Федерации. So I think Sam said the Prosecutor General of the Russian Federation, and that is what it is actually. On his website, he's called the Prosecutor General. The one reason I was a bit hesitant initially is that, and there's quite a lot of countries that the head prosecutor, the prosecutor general, is also known as the attorney general. So I wanted to check to see what terminology the Russians use, but it seems you get that a lot in Latin American countries. It's the attorney general, but okay. So the Russians use on their website the prosecutor general. But be aware that the prosecutor general and attorney general, I think, are pretty much the same thing, usually. Then подготовительные курсы. So, okay, he said training courses. That's good. I think workshops is a good quick solution, by the way. You may have noticed that's what I said I held with the Bath students earlier on. I said I held a workshop with them. So that may be a slightly quicker solution for that. And we'll just now play to the end of that paragraph.
Training courses are held for experts involved in the Uncac review process.
Okay, so he said, okay, experts, kontaktnych лиц, just by the way, that's often like focal points was a good word, good expression to know.
This course has been praised by participants and represents Russia's contribution to the review process.
Okay, so получает высокую оценку, that's a favorite Russian expression. And so Sam's done it well, it has been praised. I guess you could say, sometimes, occasionally, I go, it has one rave reviews. Another one I'll say something, it has been highly rated. So there's a few, but has been praised is a good sort of pretty straightforward way of doing it. Has been commended.
Furthermore, Russia's cooperation with the office is developing in the implementation of the St. Petersburg Declaration on nourishing private-public partnership in anti-corruption activities.
Okay, so notice what he's done here, Sam. So, продуктивно развивается. So you have one of these clauses that starts with the verb. These can sometimes be tricky in terms of what to do with them. Продуктивно развивается сотрудничество России и управления. So what he's done, he started out with cooperation between Russia and the office is developing productively. Now I'll tell you what, this can be tricky if you wait. So he's done it well. He's waited and it's worked quite well, because what's actually the full thing. The cooperation is cooperation between Russia and the office on implementing the St. Petersburg Declaration on bolstering public-private partnerships in the field of preventing corruption. So that is the thing that's actually been developing technically, that whole thing. It's not just cooperation between Russia and the office, but rather it's cooperation between Russia and the office on this whole great behemoth of a thing on implementation of the St. Petersburg Statement. So sometimes, but the way he's done it as well, so he's just said, cooperation is developing on doing this. But sometimes you decide, you make the decision, I'm gonna leave the verb till the end, like we would in English. And then just imagine if you were to launch into this whole thing, cooperation between Russia and the office on implementing the St. Petersburg Declaration, on bolstering public partnerships in combating production, is developing. You got that whole successfully, more of a продуктивно развивается. You got to remember that all the way till the end. So you have to be careful. And so again here, there's a case for saying, okay, how can I turn продуктивно развивается into the subject of the sentence? And you could say, for example, we've seen productive development. There has been productive development of cooperation. Again, it doesn't sound great English, but you just have to accept that when you're interpreting from Russian. The important thing is to get the meaning over, generally. So, point is, there are different ways of going about it. You just have to find the way that you're most comfortable with. And sometimes the way you're most comfortable with may also differ from one situation to the next. So it's just always good to know what's coming, to know what your options are, and to know how to manage when you've made the decision how you're going to deal with a certain situation, what might develop after, and how you can sort of remedy, how you can sort of fix things if it slips out of control. By the way, I'd also for поощрение государственно-частного партнерства, so he said nourishing public-private partnerships. I don't know if nourishing is quite the right verb. So I said, поощрение, I tend to go with encouraging or fostering, maybe fostering part. PPPs, by the way, that's a possible acronym you can use at times for public-private partnerships. PPP
activities, and in the academic educational initiative of the office.
Just for your information, by the way, so what he talks about there, the антикоррупционной академической инициативы управления. So yes, indeed, in ODC, there is an initiative called the Anti-Corruption Academic Initiative, ACAD. It's a collaborative project seeking to encourage the teaching and research of anti-corruption issues by higher-level education institutions. So it's a reference to that.
The Russian Federation made a voluntary contribution to the NEDC fund in 2017 to support the seamless functioning of the anti-corruption legal library of the UN and the web portal containing resources for broadening knowledge on anti-corruption, named TRAC.
One small, again, slight contrast. So what it actually says, so the way that Sam said it, you get the impression that Russia made an additional voluntary contribution of the $150,000. If you actually read the Russian, направление почти $150 тысяч из добровольного российского взноса в фонд УНП в 2017 году. So they basically actually, of their annual voluntary contribution, they basically earmarked 150,000 of that to to supporting the functioning of this library. Okay, so it's not that they gave an additional voluntary contribution. It's just that from their standard contribution, they basically they sort of directed 150,000 of it to the library. What I do like what Sam says here, поддержку бесперебойному функционированию of this library, the seamless functioning. That's a very nice word. I think I said smooth functioning, which I think is also good, but seamless, I like that a lot. And then at the end of this sentence, okay, so he talks about this web portal, and obviously there's a good chance you might not know what it is in English. And so he gives the official name of it, the speaker in Russian. Obviously, he knows what it is. And what you can do here, you don't want to sound like you're giving the official name of the portal. You say and the web portal on tools and resources, and then you're trying to just try and render the name of the portal as you hear it, rather than just saying the web portal, instruments and resources. Because then the listener will think, aha, this is what the actual web portal is called. But if you say a web portal on, then it doesn't necessarily mean that is the exact title of the web portal. It's a bit small detail, but anyway, because the actual title of that is Tools and Resources for Anti-Corruption Knowledge, TRAC.
Web portal containing resources for broadening knowledge on anti-corruption.
So as you see, what Sam did was he sort of paraphrased it very well. So web portal containing resources on expanding knowledge and combating corruption. He didn't make it sound like that was the title of the web portal.
I'd like to draw the attention of participants in this meeting to the conference on preventing corruption in sport in the run-up to the 2018 World Cup. The Russian Federation and the UNODC, with the support of BRICS countries, will hold this conference in Vienna from 5 to 6 June.
Okay, so note first, one thing to note, he split that up into 2 sentences, okay? I think he put the full stop after 2018. So, again, this guy is using long sentences, this speaker, so it's a good tactic. It just makes your job that little bit easier. Championat Mira po futbolo. Okay, so English, that's just the World Cup, right? And BRICS, the BRICS countries, you should know who they are: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
We attach great importance to this conference, which will seek to implement the resolution adopted at the 7th session of the Conference of State Parties to Uncac.
Okay, so yeah, Sam likes his attach great importance to. So it's always good to have maybe an alternative, so you're not always using the same wording. Remember, so set great store by, prioritize, whatever. And then, okay, направленное на выполнение. So again, I like with направленное to go with geared towards. I just always seem to use it. So he goes which seeks to implement the resolution, it's a good alternative.
We'll address issues in sport, including corruption while preparing sports events, rigged matches, the need to develop cooperation to prevent corruption in sport.
Okay, forum призван рассмотреть проблемы. So okay, so he's actually skipped the призван, which is perfectly good. He says the forum will address problems linked. If you wanted to render the призван, you could say that the forum is due to, for example, is due to address problems, etc. And there's some interesting words that he leaves out, which are good. So he talks about проблемы, связанные с коррупционными проявлениями в спорте. So he just says problems linked to corruption in sport. Absolutely fine. You don't need to say problems linked to corruptive phenomena in sport. Sounds much better English if you just say corruption in sport. And then these are a couple of interesting technical things here. Договорные матчи. I was trying to think, what do we say in English for those? I know match fixing. You can say match fixing. But what he said is also very good, rigged matches. So I think you can use either rigged matches or match fixing. And надлежащее управление в спорте. I think that is good governance. I think that's the expression they want there, надлежащее управление в спорте, good governance in sport. And again, at the end, в спортивной области, so he's just said, prevention of corruption in sport. You don't need to go say prevention of corruption in the field of sport, in the domain of sport. That's not necessary, just leave it out.
Etc. In conclusion, I would like to express our gratitude to our colleagues from UNADC, who for 15 years now have been providing high quality and expert assistance to member states in implementing the provisions of the UN Convention Against Corruption. Thank you.
And so that's pretty much it. So just in that final paragraph, one thing you could just say, выразить признательность нашим коллегам. You don't need to express our gratitude to. You can just thank them, all right? By that time, you may well be just knackered. You're just very tired, so you don't need to go to all the length of expressing your gratitude. You just thank our colleagues from UNODC for their highly professional expert assistance. And so that's it. That is a very technical statement. I'm not going to kid you. It's actually, my brain is tired after doing that. I had to do a lot of sort of searching up of acronyms and institutions, but just technically the way the Russian was phrased throughout that passage, throughout that statement, long sentences with all these tricky features, these constructions that need to be nominalized. That's actually I think I'm going to have a lie down for a few minutes before I come back with Roland's Magic Moments. I think I'm going to have a cup of very strong coffee, perhaps. Then I'll come back and do Roland's Magic Moments. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, so we're back then. So I'm back. I feel slightly recovered. Got a cup of coffee. That episode. That was quite the emotional roller coaster, I tell you. That was one of the most technical texts we've done, I think, on the interpretation station. But now, anyway, now that I've sort of regained my composure, let's see what Roland's magic moments were for the day. And so, in third place, number 3. I've decided to go with this very important expression, okay, возвращение активов, that comes up frequently in this text. And I say it's important because it doesn't just come up here. As I say, you hear it more. I think this is one of those expressions you tend to hear more and more these days. And so it's important not to let it phase you, that you just know it, okay. Asset recovery, I think it's the most important, perhaps, of all these aspects that that convention deals with. So remember that. Magic moment number 2 is actually, okay, it's it's a word that we're probably all familiar with. But nevertheless, it's important. It's useful just to highlight it. So способствовать, okay. And what I want you to think about is this. So if you're in a real hurry and you just want to get the meaning out, okay, help is like your go-to word, your sort of safety word, and it doesn't matter if the Russian syntax is object verb subject or subject verb object. You just, depending on what the syntax is, you can say this would be helped by, or this helps doing something. Okay, so help is your basic word, your basic sort of safety word. Now, if you have got a bit more time, however, if we're going subject verb object, then my standard solution is contributes to. This protocol contributes to enhancing knowledge, enhancing promotion, protection of human rights. But if the word order is object verb subject, as was the case in this text with, if you remember, успешному преодолению упомянутых проблем способствовала разработка международного инструмента, then try this with would benefit from. Again, you could say, it would be helped by, but I think would benefit from sounds really nice, sounds very pithy in English, sounds very smooth. So that's Roland's magic moment number 2. And magic moment number 1, the gold medal winner for today, is this issue that we were talking about throughout of the nominalization of sentences in Russian. Being comfortable with turning sentences as you hear them in the Russian, putting whatever you hear first into the nominative, not being unduly disconcerted by the fact that the first words are coming out as the dative or whatever it is, or instrumental. Turn them into the subject and then adapt the rest of the sentence as you go on. And really the best way to practice this, with a text like this, is perfect for practicing that. Find those sentences in the text that we were talking about during this episode. Just sit down by yourself and think to yourself in your head, okay, how am I going to, how can I turn this? How can I turn the word order? How can I make that word order similar, the same from the Russian into the English? That's the best way of doing it. That's the best way of mastering that technique, is just to sit down with the text in front of you and just do it in your head. And you'll find the more you do it in your head, then the more, when you're actually at work, you'll find that you're actually able to do it more quickly, more naturally, the more you practice it. So that is Roland's magic moment of the day, the issue. Thank you. Yes, Sarah Irene's technique of nominalization. So very useful, that. All right, well, that brings us to an end of today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please do smash the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe. Please do subscribe. I'm pushing towards 500 slowly. We're getting there. Tell your friends about it. Okay, spread the word about the interpretation station. You can find me on the LinkedIn group. Okay, the interpretation station LinkedIn group. That's where I put all that's my sort of archive, as I say, pending the creation of the interpretation station website. Yes, it's coming. Remember, on that archive in the LinkedIn group, also for you guys who've got Italian in your combination, I have my partner in crime, Sara Molinari, who contributes a lot of Italian translations there. You can learn a lot of stuff from her. And yes, that's pretty much it. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sam, for providing me with what's a really great text. And I'll see you in the next. Well, I'll be back with more Wham Bam Thank You, Rolans, and all that sort of thing. And we'll churn out another tutorial in a couple of weeks from now. Okay, so nothing more to say other than that episode 38 of the Interpretation Station is adjourned.